We might start with Ben. Do you want to go first, Ben?
I suppose I'm here to offer the alternative to spinal surgery. To remain at UWA for a bit. But, I mean, a lot of the reasons are going to be very obvious to you as undergraduates, and I don't need to give the party line here, but one of those dot points I thought on the CV is that you've been to a top 100 university and that you have a degree, an honours degree, whatever it is, a master's degree from a top 100 university. That carries a lot of weight wherever you go, be it in Australia or somewhere else in the world. Our graduate profiles for UWA are excellent. We have the highest employment rate of anyone on this side of Australia, and in fact one of the highest in the whole of Australia. And in terms of graduate salaries, if you can see that the UWA average graduate salary in humanities and social science is just higher than many of those lesser universities like Monash and Sydney, Melbourne, ANU. So we're just above ANU and significantly above Melbourne, Sydney, UQ. So we think you're at the right place, and I hope that you will stay here for your postgrad. I say that with a slight vested interest, but personally, I think that it's actually good to get a variety of university degrees. So I think that you might consider, whether you want to come back here. If you might think of going off somewhere for a master's and coming back for a PhD. I think that's the wisest, in fact, advice that I could give you, because a diverse CV is also valuable. That's in my interest that you stay here. So think about how you plan that CV, and having undergraduate honours, master's, PhD from one institution is not always the best solution to you, even though the figures I'm showing you are that UWA is the place to be. So you sit somewhere within this diagram, and Loretta asked me to talk briefly through the options. I'm sure most of you know them, but it's worth thinking about sort of where each of those options lead you, because you've got a number of options depending on where you are in this process ahead of you. So if you're at an undergraduate level, you have that quite difficult option now. Once you've finished that BA, you can't go automatically to PhD. You've got to choose whether you want to go through the honours route or the master's route. And there are two master's routes, master's by research and master's by coursework. So it's quite a complicated pathway ahead of you. What are the different values of those different routes? Honours is a uniquely Australian thing. It's not understood in other parts of the world. So if you get an honours, it will be treated as the equivalent of a degree in anywhere else in the world. They won't understand this is an extra year, and it won't add value to your CV. In Australia, it is understood, and it can be an entry-level qualification for a number of careers, as we heard. Increasingly in Australia, I think masters is becoming the industry standard in many industries, and that Australia is becoming more normalised with the rest of the world, where masters, rather than honours, I think in the future will be your entry-level degree. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't do the honours, because the honours, as you well know, is still Commonwealth funded. So you can get money to do an honours, you can't get money to do a master's. And so what we've done as a faculty to basically assist with this is that if you do your honours in anthropology or an allied field, as long as you choose a master's after that that is relevant and related, we will carry all of your credit from the honours into the master's. So essentially what you get is a free first year of master's by doing the honours. So there are significant financial benefits from choosing the honours route. However, you then miss out on some of the practical benefits of going the master's route, because the master's route has higher level training and a whole load of practical opportunities and sort of learning about sort of quantitative and qualitative research methods, for example, will be available to you at master's level that may be available in some honours degree, but you won't get quite such a rich set. So because people are paying for the master's degrees, we have to offer a higher quality of course, and we do. So that there are a number of things available to you at master's level that are not available at honours. So you've got to make that judgment. In terms of getting to the PhD, again, I think going straight through from honours straight through to PhD, it's becoming less normal. As I think as you're hearing from the panel here, it's really useful, in fact, to go out and get some world experience and then come back to the PhD. You're going to enjoy the PhD more, and it'll be more useful to you in the end. It'll be a much better PhD as well. So, don't necessarily think of what's the quickest way of getting to a PhD. I wouldn't think about that. Either routes, masters or honours, can take you to a PhD eventually. Neither of those routes closes that down as an option. So as long as you choose a master's that has a research component, a master's by coursework with a research component, either honours or masters at any point in the future can allow you to come back, even 50 years from now, to do the PhD. You can come back later in life if you want to do it. The Masters by Research is something not very many people choose to do, but it's still there as a degree, and it's actually a very enjoyable degree. It's a mini PhD. And in many parts of the world, people go through life having had that and not do the PhD. And that Masters by Research actually contains most of the skills that they need in their career. So it's something I think that you should think about. So it doesn't take as long as a PhD. Typical Masters by Research would be 2 years. Some people run into 3, but 2 is a good amount of time to spend. A PhD would typically be 4 years, but your average PhDs are finishing in 5 or 6 years. So it's a much longer investment in terms of your time before you can earn. In terms of earning potential, the Australian figures are rather interesting for this. Those of us that made the mistake of going on to PhD, in terms of earning potential, it's not a great one. PhDs on average in their first 5 years after graduation earn less than people with masters by coursework. Quite a few $1,000s per year less. So the masters by coursework is what employers are looking for. That's what the statistics are showing. Painful as it is for those of us with PhDs and who value the PhD greatly.
That's another reason people do anthropology, for the money.
That's true.
So what are those masters that are open to you by masters by coursework that can potentially give you more earning potential? The new one starting next year, and it's led out of sociology, anthropology, and social research methods, and I'm sure you've all heard about this because Farida and Loretta are sort of spearheading and driving this. A superb new degree that has a range of those very practical courses that weren't available when some of the panel were at UWA, but that do give you specific courses on quantitative methods, qualitative methods, interviewing,
focus groups,
and a whole range of skills that will be of very, very practical anthropological use in your future career. The other one that I'm involved in is the Master of Heritage Studies. We've heard a number of people talking about anthropologists very commonly, like archaeologists, end up working in the heritage industry.
Ben's other job is in archaeology. I'm
an archaeologist, so closely, in many universities, archaeology and anthropology is a combined discipline, so I see myself partly as an anthropologist. Master of Heritage Studies is a very broad course that looks both at natural and cultural heritage. And unlike sort of many other degrees in Australia, it's not focusing you specifically, say, on museum studies. It's not called curatorial studies or museum studies, which is the sort of more common version, but it's much more anthropological, in fact. We have units on intangible heritage and a whole range of units also taught jointly with the School of Indigenous Studies, with the aim of preparing people to work in quite a diversity of workplaces. It could be a museum, but it could just as equally be a national park, an Indigenous representative group, an NGO, a whole range of things for which, in fact, your anthropological skills will also prepare you very well. Why do a master's sort of now rather than an honours? It is a difficult time in the workplace, and we're all very aware of that. There are not as many jobs available at the moment as there were 4 years ago. These kinds of downturns tend to be short term, and so quite a number of people are choosing. We're seeing the uptake of our degrees increasing at the moment, and I think that's because people are making the choice to come back and sort of improve their CV at a time when it's more difficult to go out and get a job. So it's something to think about. You know, choosing a master's one of these 2 master's degrees would give you another 2 years in academia, and hopefully by then the workplace will be a better place to soak you up with your additional skills, with a better CV ready for that workplace. It's just something to think about. So it's my job to encourage you to build your career with us, but I also think that we provide you with a range of options that are genuinely world-class and that will prepare you well for the workplace. I wanted to punt something that Jordan is also working on. So the Postgraduate Student Association in Arts has prepared a series of monthly seminars. That's the first Wednesday of every month, and they're looking at issues that are of direct relevance to postgraduates, but also people in honours. I think sort of looking at sort of how to get engaged in professional placements. The next one is specifically looking at the sort of thorny issue of whether you should, how you can get teaching experience perhaps in your career here, so that one of the things you might want to put on your CV is that you've taught here. And so we're going to talk through some of these quite difficult issues and in fact brainstorm faculty policy in the process. And I would encourage all of you that are at honours master's level now, or even thinking about it, to come along to this group and help and engage with that group. So it's the first Wednesday of every month.
Thank you, Ben. I'll hand over to Graham now. But a point that has come up, I think, from this discussion, and you mentioned it too, was the importance of internships. And Sarah, I introduced Sarah earlier, who's sort of doing work experience in a way like an internship at the Burn.
Well, I did.
You did it before you got the job.
Yeah.
Which is exactly one of the reasons to do it. And so I know, Graham, you've mentioned that the faculty is talking about offering more internships, but that could be one of the things that you talk about, as well as more broadly, especially as an international scholar coming to Australia, about the international market in the PhD world.
Okay, I had sort of 3 dot points that I wanted to address, and that's kind of part 1. And so let me start with the internship thing, because this is something that I really feel is very important if you can get your hands on one. I've come here I joined UWA about a year ago, or less than a year, from the University of Bath in the UK, which probably nobody's actually heard of. You've probably heard of Bath, but not heard of the University of Bath. But in the rankings in the UK, it's we've got what's called the Russell Group, which is kind of the equivalent of the Group of 8. It's not in the Russell Group, Bath, but it sits alongside the Russell Group. It's a very good university, but by no means top 10 in many areas. But we had consistently the best employment statistics for any university in the UK. Every year we had our graduates had the best employment, and the reason was that Bath, the standard model in Bath, was what they called a sandwich program, where you did 2 years at university, 1 year at work, and then 1 year back at university. And so for employers looking at somebody with a degree in anthropology and somebody else with a degree in anthropology, the guy from Bath had also been in the work experience, or the gal from Bath had also been in the workplace. So if you can do an internship and if you can do a work placement as part of your degree, it just puts you, you've got that advantage on somebody else coming out with the same qualification, even if they're coming out from a fancy university overseas or wherever. So I would really urge you to do that. The faculty at the moment, we are looking at how we can deliver practicums, work placements, internships more effectively. I can't promise any timeline on that, to be honest. It's something that we've just started looking at. So depending on what stage you are in your career, this may or your degree, this may or may not be of benefit to you.
But they're in the master's degrees already.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And so you can certainly do it as part of the option is there within the undergraduate program as well. The issue is us servicing it better. At the moment, there have been particular areas, the Aurora project or some particular disciplines that have quite a good relationship with particular organisations and interns. But as a faculty, I think we haven't been as effective as we can in terms of building relationships with potential employers or hosts for internships. And that's something we're trying to look to push forward with over the next year or so. I'm not an anthropologist. I've worked with anthropologists, so my field is international development, and in terms of disciplines, I sort of sit at the threshold of politics, political science, and development economics. And being all anthropologists, I'm sure you all love economics. But I wanted to say a couple of things about labour market economics, which particularly having worked with developing countries quite a lot, I think these provide very useful ways of thinking about your career. So within labour market economics, you have kind of the idea of, well, you have the idea of the labour market, right? That people come looking for jobs and people come with jobs and we try to match them up, basically. That's what the labour market does. And there's two theories about how that works. One theory is kind of skills-based, the idea that the employers come looking for particular skills and the universities and schools train you with those skills and we match off on the basis of skills. The other theory is what's called the sheepskin effect, which is the idea that actually the labour market is just a ranking mechanism, right? It's just about sorting people and ranking them because it's too much information to actually try and process for the employers to try and work out whether to employ you or not. So it's called the sheepskin effect because in them olden days you got your diploma on it was made of sheepskin. And the basic point of that is that it's the level and the institution that you studied at which matter more than the skills. Right, so the skills are secondary to simply the rank you have. So the good news for you, as Ben was saying, if you're at one of the top 100 universities in the world, and this is really, I mean, to reinforce what Ben said, this is a dot point that you have to put on there, particularly if you're looking for a career outside of Australia. Because you've never heard of Bath. None of my colleagues have heard of UWA. Okay, so UWA is very well known in Western Australia, very well known in Australia, but outside of Australia it's not very well known at all. But it is top 100. You can tell an employer it's top 100 in 3 of the 4 rankings, international ranking systems. It's a top 100 university. The level of education you have also matters, right? So honours is always going to be better, not because of skills, but because of simply ranking you in the workplace. And I worked in Bath with one of the sort of leading labour market economists for Bath for the UK, who did really interesting work, sort of again, picking up on something Ben was saying, about depressions, recessions, and the effect they have on your lifetime earning potential. And basically what they found in the UK is that if you enter the labour market, right, so if you go out and start your career when the economy is on a downturn, that negatively impacts your earning potential throughout your entire, I don't want to sound depressing because there's a clear answer to it, but it negatively affects your earning potential throughout your entire career. If you start in the labour market when the when the economy is in a downturn, it's very hard to get up to the earnings level that people have who enter the labour market when it's in full carbon spewing productivity. So the lesson to that for me is for people in this situation, I would strongly, I'm not saying you have to do a PhD or honours or postgraduate, but it seems to me if anyone's in a position where they should really be thinking seriously about further education, it's people looking at graduating now, because a higher degree, whether honours, postgraduate, PhD, will A, rank you higher in the labour market anyway, and B, at this particular point, may be a good way to enter the labour market when it's on an upturn rather than when it's on a downturn in a few years' time. PhDs and international development. So we've talked a lot about anthropology in Australia. Anthropology is a really important, high-demand skill internationally, particularly in international development agencies. And if you want to think about an alternative career option, international development is one that I would really think you should be looking at. Things like native title, right? Native title is an issue in so many developing countries around the world in very different ways. In Malaysia, where I do a lot of work, they're actually trying to escape native title because the British gave native titles to the Malays 100 years ago. And what's happening now is that the Malays can't sell their land because it's native title, and the only people with the capital to buy the land are domestically are ethnic Chinese. It's less of a problem now, but 30 years ago, this was a real problem for rural Malays, that they actually were stuck. Native title had stuck them in the rural areas because they couldn't sell the land and move to the urban areas. So native title is something that cuts across development in all kinds of places, and any experience you have with native title in Australia will inevitably be transferable. Anthropology and project evaluation I had an opportunity when I was finishing my PhD to get a job in the project evaluation department of the UN. and I turned it down because it sounded so dull. And actually, it's the most, and you have top titles like Project Analyst, right? It sounds so dull. I'm sorry, but it sounds so dull. It's the most important, interesting work you can do, I think. If it's actually about, working out what works and doesn't. And within international development, right, you have two schools of thought. You have the number crunchers like me, I'm afraid, who just want to compute literacy rates and see which intervention works. And then you have the much better people who are actually asking that why question and saying, what is working, what are the other effects? And so a lot of international developments, particularly on the UN side, but increasingly things like the World Bank and its agencies, are looking for anthropologists. There's a fantastic book by a guy called Michael Woolcock, which I've put in the full title too, but it's a study of a massive development project in Indonesia. It's won all kinds of prizes. That project has gone on to be replicated elsewhere, and he's an anthropologist, actually in Australia, and I think he was trained in UQ. So anthropology is in demand internationally, in international development. And the thing with international development, which I like about it, is that the revolving door between academia and a professional career is very, very fluid. So I've done a number of secondments into international development agencies. I haven't spent as much time in the real world as I probably should to claim any kind of credibility. But I've spent a bit of time in the real world, and I also work a lot sort of consulting for international development agencies. But there's many other people who are basically working in country, but are also coming back into academia to do masters, to do MBAs, to refresh and develop their career. So if you want to keep your options open, international development is a way to go. If that interests you, language skills are really important. Right? You don't have to speak Chinese, Japanese, Korean, which are the ones we teach, the Asian languages we teach here. Indonesian's a very useful one if you want to work in Indonesia. But just showing language skills, showing the ability to acquire languages is really important, because you're not going to be able to work in country for a long time without acquiring some language skills.
Fantastic, Graham. I mean, I'd like to add to the sheepskin and the skills market the strength of weak ties. And that's partly what this is about tonight, that being part of WASA helps you get connected. Meeting people in the workforce in all these different sectors helps you get connected, because maybe it's only in parochial places like Perth, but I also think that this spans the globe. Who you know is also still really important. And I know networking, that word often turns people off, but I like to use the term the strength of weak ties instead of networking, which is about recognising that those weak ties that we might have through associations with others, like through WASA or through a panel like this, actually can make a difference in terms of what you start to think about doing, who you might have a conversation with about what you might do next, and how you might find someone to help you do that next step. And that's also, I think, an important part of pursuing a job. Let me open it back up to everyone.
I was just going to say, on that note, attend conferences at every opportunity. I've just come back from 2 months in Britain. I had a conference at the start, conference at the end. I stayed in Wales in the interim, finishing the second complete draft of my thesis. And I was astounded by the research opportunities that I encountered along the way. So I said to Loretta when I saw her this week, I only got back on Monday, I've got this platter and I'm going to have to choose, and I don't know what to do.
And it's really important with your
so many people want this in Britain and Germany. I have to think about archaeological.
Can I just say one other thing that I forgot to say about academic careers? And for those of you sort of wondering about an academic career, and that you see things in the news, and whether it's from Christopher Pine or things going on here that perhaps you're not interested in, I just want to say it's a fucking awesome career, right? Okay, there's all kinds of problems with it, but we get to do what we love, right? And that's the basic thing, And for me, there's the added advantage: I can wear a hoodie and don't have to shave.
Other kinds of things.
When a lot of panellists are talking about the Aurora internship, what is the likelihood of that being incorporated into our degrees? Is that being recognised as part of our degrees? being in Western Australia and taking part in Aurora internships and being in native title and gaining that experience, what is the likelihood of that being recognised as part of our degree?
It could easily be recognised as part of a master's degree. So most of our masters have professional placements within them, and if, that kind of internship would count, and would therefore count as 12 points of credit towards many master's degrees.
And don't they also count as an undergraduate unit?
Yeah, so there is an undergraduate unit called the Arts Practicum, which has been, this is one of the things we're looking at, basically making it more effective.
There is a big difference between 100 hours and an essay and 6 weeks of being immersed in the community and taking part in a community process.
That's more like a master's level professional placement, the Aurora.
And also, but to Ben Smith, when it comes to rock art management and protection, what would you like to see more from anthropology students as far as adding to, I know, doing a rock art unit and having a great discussion about the application of social theory to rock art research and things like that. What would you like to see more from anthropology students that adds to the management and protection of rock art in Western Australia specifically?
As an archaeologist who's worked in Africa for the last 15 years, I've always worked with anthropologists. They've been absolutely crucial collaborators on all of my research projects. And I'm slightly stunned arriving here that we don't have anthropologists embedded in all of our research programs. And I don't think that's the lack of will on the archaeological side. I think the lack of people coming forward.
Well, it's a passion in Wassa. Like we spend a lot of time with
I think
archaeologists.
you'll be snapped up by people in the Centre for Rock Art Research and Management.
Yeah, in Wassa we collaborate a lot and we work a lot when we're doing assessments and things like that on getting an archaeological prospect with our anthropological in talking about important discussions and things like that. And I think it's, you know, like as anthropologists in Western Australia, we need to know what archaeologists want us to be better at, and we maybe also want to talk to archaeologists who are coming from a scientific perspective about what we would like them to consider as
anthropologists create better archaeology.
Yeah.
They always add value to archaeology projects.
Anthropologists create better everything.
Except television.
I think it's been very interesting, I think, also to think about this panel discussion in terms of how we might develop our program. And, you know, about thinking about graduate employment opportunities from the perspective of program development, which is not what we normally do. And also, historically, the Department of Anthropology here was the Department of Anthropology and Archaeology. We also had linguistics for a while. And it's about, you know, we're a very small anthropology department. We cover some things, but we don't have that interface, and that's another space that we could maybe talk about growing. And it comes out of this kind of panel, interestingly, more than the academic side of the discussions. It's been very useful for both sides.
Well, I guess I was just going to ask about the structure of the course a little bit and employment opportunities, because having come into university quite late in life, the idea of doing postgraduate, then master's, PhD, I'll be knackered by then. And I've already had, you know, like a working life, and like things like the Aurora internship, and there's some other internships and like the arts practicum thing. I found out about that through other students, and like the Aurora project application, I found out about it the other day, and like the closing date was the next day, and it was like, so why aren't we finding out about that stuff, and if that's the stuff that's going to help us to get a job down the track, you know, that's the thing that I'm curious about, is what can I do, or what are those things I can do that I can, you know, get a career without having to go down the sort of academia track.
Don't say having to.
Having to. I probably will end up there anyway.
Well, it's not part of the design of our programs. We don't write a pathway for our programs that includes these things. We're beginning to, and we do at certain levels. But it's exactly the insight that I've got from tonight, is that we should think about writing that into our programs.
A bit with what to do and what units to choose and whether it's relevant, and, you know, I'd rather be doing practical stuff.
Can I just add to that? I wouldn't even wait necessarily to do an internship either. I was just on just a couple of months ago, I was on a panel for recruitment, and it was for a graduate science position, so it's a little bit different from anthropology, but sort of similar. We had nearly 290 something applicants for that one job, and the way that you sort through that is you just can't take anyone. You have to say, okay, they've got work experiences. So basically, only people who had some form of practical work experience in that field. So if you've been working in even a great admin job for years, that just didn't count compared to those who'd actually gone out and just worked. It's not fair to have to go and work for free, but that's what people were doing, and that's how they got the job.
It's certainly happening more and more in other parts of the world. It's becoming, it's not ideal, but it's becoming very commonplace. Someone who hasn't asked a question yet, not because I don't want second questioners, but
I have something quickly I wanted to ask. I've been thinking about this whole idea of the arts practicum lately, and I was wondering, is it possible for students at a body like WASA to come up with something with the support of faculty that contributes towards credit points? Say, some of the things that I've learnt about in my internship that I was doing, say genealogical research, we don't learn that skill here at UWA. Is it possible to have like a grassroots student run program where we learn those skills and have that actually attributed to our credit points at uni, or is that something that...
I would have thought that's very difficult.
Yeah.
The university has to have a sort of process of accreditation and maintenance of standards, and while we wouldn't question your ability to deliver that, I think the university is unlikely to.
We could definitely work with you to develop something that would be creditable.
Yeah.
And the arts practicum has quite a lot of flexibility.
yes, I think it does. And also you could think about your international exchange options. I don't know if we do them nationally, do we? But you can go and do a unit somewhere else for a semester.
Yeah.
Where you might see a course that delivers what you're missing here, and you could do it as part of the international semester abroad. I mean, it's expensive, so there's equity issues, but there is,
So we have a specific agreement with UQ where there is money for people to do exchanges, and you can apply as WASA as well to have a special sort of collaborative program with UQ. That would be a possibility.
Sorry, the University of Queensland?
University of Queensland, yeah. And then we have reciprocal agreements with Murdoch and Curtin where you can exchange units with those universities.
That's really useful for language, if we don't teach the language you want here.
My name is Amir, I am from Pakistan. Basically, I am assistant professor of political science in Pakistan. But here I am a PhD visiting scholar under the supervision of Professor Dr. Semina and Dr. David Megler. So it is very, first of all, I am thankful to Dr. Farida Fosdar, Dr. Lorita, and Dr. Lara McKenzie, because through Dr. Farida, they kept me updated about various seminars conducted or held by under the auspices of Anthropology and Sociology Department. Very dynamic ladies and dynamic department. Appreciate your work they are doing well. What I draw the conclusion that these are just younger graduates and they are seeking some sort of excellencies in their respective fields. Everything is neutral. The scope is created by the individual himself. It depends upon the individual that how much he excels in his field. And it depends upon that acquire something innovative. So I also discussed with Professor Graham Brown that no doubt we have some sort of security problems in Pakistan, but we have a lot of opportunities for the Australian students with respect to explore different areas. So the anthropologists, the archaeologists, they have the opportunities to come over here and to explore different areas and to conduct research. Because in the modern world, no discipline is specific because it is so much diverse and integrated. So the integrated approach towards should be adopted by a particular discipline holder. So that is why my suggestion is, Professor Graham Brown is here, but he has his own, he is right, because we have some sort of security problem nowadays. Global war on terror is going on and militancy insurgencies. But that is not the case actually. There is no such type of security threats to academia or these things, because the people who are engaged in such type of activities which goes against the national interest of the state, so they will face what Ben and you said, that international exchange program. So we have the opportunities in Pakistan for you people, but it depends upon I'm wholeheartedly extending the hand of friendship towards you people, but depends upon you. We can send, and personally I am willing to send my students in Pakistan to you to get more and more exposure in terms of cultural exchange, just to know about the cultural values with respect to explore more ideas and research. Because today I have met with Michael Azariades, and he is specialist in vivo like these things. Mm-hmm. So that is why I also shared my views with him that I will send my students to you.
And international exchange is becoming a feature of at least the hype around future job market. We're focusing on that in one of our coursework units in honours. And I know that the university is building increasing partnerships to facilitate that. I haven't forgotten about Sally. Sally, is there anything in Anna Wiley's list that we haven't covered?
Anna sent me an email, which I can just read out. It's not very long. Okay, so she says, so a bit of background. I'm the manager of apprenticeship policy at the Department of Training and Workforce Development. It's traditionally a very contentious and complex area to work in, with many different agendas and stakeholder viewpoints. It's hard to strike the right policy note because I need to meet the needs of the employer, the apprentice, the industry, the Commonwealth, the unions, peak employer groups, and most of all, the department's own strategic goals. It's a very tricky job, and I have been well trained for it, but nobody ever expects me to say that I studied anthropology. And then she mentions critical, conceptual, analytical skills. There's always a question why that needs to be answered and understood. The content itself is not so important. Every day I write on a new subject, so it's how I approach an issue, and I basically run through a matrix in my mind of questions that need some thought. What's the context? Is there a precedence? What's the political appetite to resolve the issue? Risks involved? Are there any legislative issues? What research do I need to do? Are there any gaps in the data? Have I considered the broader public policy interests? What evidence is there to support my recommendation? Will anyone be disadvantaged or conversely get a commercial advantage by a decision? Basically, I'm describing the steps I use to think through a problem. It seems intuitive to me, but I'm often surprised that quite a few people struggle to thoroughly think through issues. And then understanding stakeholder issues. My degree gave me a 360-degree view of the world, where one perspective doesn't take precedence over another. I can appreciate diverse and often contradictory perspectives and work towards stakeholder consensus. And then finally, she says, written skills. Excellent writing is underestimated and very scarce. I try to have clarity of thought and remember that the Minister is likely to know even less about the issue than I do and have even less time to process the information. So it's my job to distill the most contentious, complex problem in a one-page brief. Alternatively, I might be preparing a policy paper where I need to step out all the thinking that I've outlined above and make a policy recommendation. I hope that anyone that has studied anthropology gives some thought to working in the public sector, especially in the policy research area. The skills I have seem surprisingly specialised and highly valued. I hope this is helpful.
It's been a great summary, actually, hasn't it, of all of of the key issues.
Pick up on a couple of things and come back to Graham's point earlier about theory as well. Firstly, in relation to that, when I was at my PhD, I was lucky enough, I got a 5-year postdoc position, which is just joy if you're an academic. And it was a very well-funded centre, funded by the UK Department for International Development. Towards the end of it, we were reporting back to them, and we went to London and sort of did the big report. And the head of the centre was sort of listing all the books, all the articles, all the papers, and then all of a sudden, by my calculations, you produce somewhere around 1 million words. What we really need is 1 page. And there's always a tension in that in that realm of policy that you recognise you have to communicate it. That skill to communicate briefly a nuanced message is something that I think social sciences, economists can't do that because they can't do the nuance, right? But they can do the brief but not the nuance. And coming back to the issue about theory, will you ever use dialectic in a real world job? I doubt it. But what you will use is, I think, the tools. So the sort of the grand social theory, maybe not, but what any social science gives you, I think, is a set of tools with which to understand and think about what's going on around you. Even if it's sort of like ideas about social reciprocity, I'm going to be that apologist because I can't pronounce it. But ideas around sort of gift and social reciprocity, when you see that in action in the real world, it helps you interpret and understand the world around you.
It augments your approach.
Yeah. So think about theory as a tool, not as a grand theory that you apply, I think.
Well, teaching the development of social thought and having given quite a bit of thought about how this is useful for people who might not be, I sort of framed it as social theory sometimes lets you ask non-intuitive questions. So in anthropology, we're always focusing on the way that so much of what we do and humans do is unarticulated and unthought, and you have these ruts. So what social theory can do is give you practice in asking kind of non-intuitive questions and asking different kinds of questions about the same thing from different angles. So that's, how do you get that onto a bullet point? But I think it's actually a real skill, and it's something that not everybody's very good at.
Are there any other comments or questions before we draw the event to a close? Thank you. Thank you.
Just one quick question,
yes?
because it hasn't been asked, it hasn't been raised. It follows on from what Tegan said and what Claire said, and I'm a mature age student as well. I was a youth worker for 7 years, so I really resonate with some of the things that you said. What about equivalency? Nobody's spoken about equivalency. Does that get you credit points at this university? How do we get it?
As in
work experience?
Yeah, I was, well, this sounds like, it's the only example I can think of is my own, so I'm sorry, but I was the statewide coordinator of YMCA Youth Services, and I tell you what, a lot of outreach youth work is very transferable with doing ethnography, for instance. Is this something you guys look at or are prepared?
It's not something that we give credit for, but it does allow you to get into a PhD. So the PhD will say you've got to have this, or the equivalent thereof, and that's where we look at the life skill equivalent of academic qualifications.
For the masters?
And for the masters you have to have a degree. Qualifications for a masters is an undergraduate degree with a certain pass rate.
Okay.
But a master's by research, yes, the same criteria would apply. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, what is that pass rate? So if you wanted to get into your master's?
All the arts ones are standard, so you need 65%.
Wow. 65.
Yeah.
But if you bombed out in some languages or economics or something, you'll look at just your anthropology WAM.
I should say 65% of your final year.
Of our final year. A lot of us have changed degrees from science and commerce to arts.
Yeah, if you've had hideous science, we often say it's not all by special motivation, it's always by special motivation. I see a lot of special motivations, we look at them very carefully.
Special consideration.
Special consideration.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not actually special consideration.
And do we get interviewed for that as well?
Is it different?
Special consideration is what you call,
Okay, I just wanted to make a final point, if I may, about something really intriguing that you said about, you started off and you said your personality, being resilient, being on the ball, and that has come up a lot because even in the non-native title areas, which maybe are a little bit easier but not necessarily refugees and youth, you know, how this intuitive knowledge about being able to put yourself in different people's perspectives and understand this sort of mediation role, getting that into a dot point, I think, would be something really nice.
If you can work out a way to articulate that.
Yes, so my degree has, you know, helped me be able to respond in a resilient way to pressures in the workforce or to competing contested positions or something. We have to work on this together, I think. But I was very interested in how, you know, many people had raised this issue of things that are hard to define but really are real.
They are real, and they exist in anthropology graduates, whether people are self-selecting because the kind of people who have those qualities are interested in anthropology, or whether it is something you pick up through the degree, I don't know. But people come out the other end with the qualities that you need out there in native title, and I'm sure in other areas as well.
Okay, a very special thank you to all of our wonderful panellists for giving up their time.